Okay, hi everyone again. Wake up. How many coffee cups did you have today to make sure to last until 4 p.m.? 2? Who had more? 3? Okay. 5? Seriously? Oh, I have a... It sounds like a challenge because I also had 5 coffees today. Not because of the panels, just because of the flights overnight. It's kind of difficult to sustain. All right, great. But I hope after this session, you will not need coffee, or during the session, I hope you don't need coffee, because it's quite important things we want to talk about today, and we want to have it as roundtable. Not a panel where people are just talking about their achievements and successful accomplishments, and maybe sometimes not successful, but anyway. Here we want to discuss very important questions of, I don't know, like last 3 years, I believe, about AI and, of course, AI impact on our life. And if you remember the title of our session, Who Programs Whom? And basically advancing business and human rights in crisis-affected and marginalized communities. So this is what we want to talk about today, and of course this is what we want to cover with our speakers online and in person here from International Youth Training Center, Access Now, Article 19, and of course NSI, right? I will of course conduct the introduction, but first, probably not everyone, I didn't annoy everyone in this room yet, but for those who don't know, so my name is Svetlana Zenz, Article 19, Asia. I'm basically covering Asia-Pacific region and the area of business and human rights principles, trying to help civil society and business sector talk to each other. Sometimes some CSOs call us that we are trying to make the business sector more friendly, but it's not true. We're actually working on creating constructed dialogue between these two sectors or groups, you can call, variously. And of course, can we have one slide from my presentation behind me, please? It's just, to put pictures and QR codes, which are more easy to understand. So basically, program which I'm leading on is covering a variety of aspects in China, Vietnam, even Myanmar, and we've done research on business operations and civil society activities in those countries and ASEAN including. We came up with Clarity. It's the Human Rights Impact Assessment Shadow assessment tool for civil society. You can scan QR code under Clarity if you want, or you can also ask me after the session if you need the contact. And of course, you can also download all the reports of research we've done. And another thing which was recently published by George Washington Law Clinic is the CSO guidelines on engaging with tech sector. So basically, it's a guidelines for civil society organizations which want to engage with the ICT companies. It's also telecoms, it also big tech, and this especially for with companies which are working in conflict-affected and high-risk areas. And these guidelines also translated into several local languages like Myanmar, Vietnamese, Uyghur, and there is also mentoring coming soon. You can also download that under the Law Clinic website. And the part of these guidelines also coincides with our topic today. And it also covers current conflict situation, current conflicts, and how to engage with tech sector provides the steps, what CSOs need to do. Do you hear me well? Because then the stage on how civil society should act when it's a when it's the armed conflict going on. So, for example, there's few steps for CSOs and few recommendations in the guidelines which are provided by experts, academia, private sector. And of course, what CSO want or need to do after the conflict or crisis ended. So this is a few words of the work which we are doing, but today I would like also to cover very important parts on our topic. We can remove the slide, I guess. Thank you. So in the current situation, as you know, the ASEAN has a couple of policies launched. For instance, there's a guide on AI governance and ethics, and of course expanded guide for generative AI, which I think expected to be more popular by the end of the year. But anyway, so this start what has ASEAN now on AI. There is also ASEAN as organization published the Responsible AI Roadmap for 2025 until 2030 with the policy steps and so-called trustworthy operations of AI. OECD AI Observatory also have live policy tracker which widely used by Asian governments. And from the legal perspective, like frameworks, we have 3 Asian countries like China, South Korea, and Japan, which came up with the legislation on AI. We have plenty other policies which are not binding, have non-binding guidance on AI implementation. And at least 4 ASEAN states published national AI strategies and roadmaps, how to use and abuse at some point AI, such as like in Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and more. And talking about this, we're facing a lot of issues regarding the human rights part, when human rights been violated by simple algorithm. For example, cases when misinformation been spread, like in Thailand about Taiwanese-Japanese cooperation, and fake statements on applications to these indigenous groups, or threats which are posed by military in Myanmar after the coup in 2021 by implementation or deploying AI CCTV cameras and identification of faces of those who are disagreeing with the current ideology. And overall critics about the bias, trust, hallucination of AI, and etc. So on this note, I would like to also raise some key points which we would like to discuss during this roundtable, and I will go to the questions, guiding questions, after the speakers finish their part. So what we want to reach out through this roundtable, of course, to expose gaps and risks, or discuss gaps and risks in current AI and BHR frameworks, particularly in high-risk, under-regulated contexts such as the conflict zones and indigenous territories. Showcase community-based strategies, if there are any or anyone wants to share about. Also including aftermath dialogue, indigenous wisdom, use innovation, human rights impact assessments that can enhance AI accountability. And perhaps to co-create ethical guidelines and advocacy priorities for integrating AI governance into business and human rights agendas at national and regional levels. So to start with, I would like to start with our speaker online, Ani Zaman. Are you here? Ani Zaman is an independent journalist, media researcher, and press freedom advocate for over 15 years. And she has experience covering political and social issues across Pakistan, Germany, UK, Asia. She is the co-founder of Exile Hub, an initiative that supports Myanmar's journalists and human rights defenders, collaborates with international organizations such as a Free Press Ultimated to advance media freedom, and journalist safety worldwide. Sorry, it's 4 a.m. and I spoke a lot today. So Annie, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's an honor to join this space. And I thank the organizers, particularly Svetlana from Article 19, for bringing us all together at such an urgent moment. I come to you as a journalist and as the co-founder of Exile Hub, an organization that supports displaced storytellers and human rights defenders. In my work, I have stood alongside colleagues from Myanmar and many other fragile contexts where truth, freedom of expression, and human rights are under constant threat. Today, as when we speak about technology and AI, we must remember that for many communities like mine, the stakes are life and death. AI can be a tool of empowerment, helping journalists verify information, helping communities access education, or amplifying the voices of those silenced. In Myanmar, for example, initiatives like Myanmar Witness, where colleagues contribute greatly, use open source investigation and AI assisted verifications to check and document where the junta is carrying out airstrikes. The work not only protects truth, but also provides evidence for accountability. At the same time, organizations like Stop Online Harm Myanmar track, expose, and counter the disinformation and hate speech that floods social media platforms against women, particularly women who are political. Their work reminds us that communities are not passive victims of AI driven harm. They are actively building tools and strategies to resist it. These efforts show what happens when AI and digital technologies are guided by integrity and rooted in local expertise. But we have to remember that AI is also a weapon. It's a kind of two-edged sword. The same technologies are manipulated to spread disinformation and incite violence against vulnerable groups, particularly the Rohingya. Automated moderation systems often fail to recognize local languages or political context, allowing hate to spread while silencing genuine dissent. Communities already on the margins bear the heaviest cost. So, when we discuss remedies for AI harms, we must see AI not as a neutral code, but as a system which is shaped by power, politics, and not to forget profit. For communities harmed by AI, remedies must mean more than a form on a website or an email to a help desk, which we have seen often in the last several years. True remedy is recognition of harm. Companies must acknowledge when these platforms or products enable violence. Accountability. Affected people should know who is responsible and how to reach them. Reparations, not only apologies, but meaningful compensations and structural changes to prevent recurrence. At present, these avenues are almost non existent. Victims are left navigating corporate opacity, automated replies, and global legal systems that feel unreasonable. It's so difficult to reach out to any big system. Like, for example, even our community, like people from Myanmar, they cannot access like simple thing like a Wise bank transfer or a Revolut account. Coming to local knowledge, which can be used as a compass. Local knowledge is not optional, it is essential. We all must remember that. Algorithms fail in Myanmar because they are not trained in its local languages, dialects, and cultural contexts. Moderation systems collapse because they totally ignore like political realities. Policy frameworks drafted in New York or Brussels ring hollow if they do not engage the lived wisdom of communities facing harm. Local journalists, activists, and elders hold deep knowledge of how narratives are manipulated online and offline, how disinformation spreads in a small village and on Facebook, and what resilience looks like. This knowledge must guide ethical AI governance. And we need to have, I also would like to bring some shared struggles across borders, because this is not only Myanmar's struggle. Around the world, from migrant workers navigating surveillance in the Gulf to youth in Africa facing algorithm bias to indigenous groups whose knowledge is mined without consent, the story repeats. Communities are made invisible when policies are written without them. Yet we also see shared resilience, cross-border solidarity movements pushing for transparency, journalists and civil society exposing abuses, youth demanding climate and digital justice together. AI harms are global, but so are the remedies if we listen across borders. As a journalist and co founder of Exile Hub, I believe in the power of stories. The stories of those who are harmed by AI must be heard, not hidden. And the stories of initiatives like Myanmar Witness, Exile Hub, and Stop Online Harm Myanmar remind us that technology, when guided by integrity and rooted in local expertise, can expose abuses, counter disinformation, and saves lives. And if we are serious about ethical AI governance, then companies, governments, and forums like these must center the voice of affected communities, not as token, but as leaders. Let us build systems that recognize dignity before data, humanity before algorithms, and justice before profit. Only then we can say that AI serves people rather than the other way around. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Annie, and hope you feel better. We know that it's not easy for you now, but thank you so much for this keynotes. I hope it will not stop on this point. And I would like to go to another speaker who is also online. Okay. So Raman Jetsingh Shima, or Chima, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, so who is the Senior International Council and Asia Pacific Policy Director at the Access Now, where he also serves as the Global Cybersecurity Lead. He co-founded India's Save the Internet.in campaign for internet neutrality, the Article 21 Trust, and the Internet Freedom Foundation. He assisted the legal team in the Supreme Court's landmark Shreya Singhal v. Union of India judgment on the internet free speech and was named to Forbes India's 30 under 30 in law and policy. Previously, he worked as a policy counsel and government affairs manager at the Google Asia Pacific, served in senior industry association roles, and was Chevenix Cybersecurity Fellow in 2019, a graduate of the National Law School of India University, Bangalore, and he was chief editor to the Indian Journal of Law and Technology. Very important. So Raman, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Svetlana, and thank you everybody there in the room. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with you regarding this critical conversation and to also be able to follow an excellent co-panelist who has been able to articulate the real importance of why we need to recognize the work of communities and the real harms that are in the space, and that we need to actually understand who's impacted by the evolution technology, including the role AI is playing there, and to approach it from a grounded human rights perspective. I work with the international not-for-profit organization Access Now. We characterize ourselves as a digital security and digital rights organization that was born back in 2009, so still comparatively young, but that recognize that technology can help empower us, but it can also place us at risk. And I know that is coming up repeatedly in conversations, in rooms, in the hallways there at the BHR Forum in Bangkok. A recognition that tech can empower us and has often empowered us, but is often, in fact, a new avenue for threats, new harms, and that tech itself is sometimes now solidifying and cementing inequalities and perpetuating systems of authoritarianism that are troubling and concerning. In many ways, the Asia Pacific region is the best, we could say, unfortunate example of this, and in particular, the illustration of Myanmar. Myanmar showed us the hopes and the potential that technology could bring to communities to perhaps drive change, reform, to help open up and further you could drive generational change in terms of recognizing openness and new ways of communication without authoritarian structures. And we saw that promise of technology and the fact that, unfortunately, ultimately, technology is often being channeled through tech platforms, which are vulnerable to control, to manipulation, to often perpetuating content or to perpetuating discussions that reward the most polarizing, that reward those that established interests and dominant players want to advance. And in many ways, Myanmar showed us the weaponization of technology. the use of tech platforms in the context of the Rohingya genocide, as well as the increasing use of technology by different political actors and authoritarian actors to seed the grounds of what ultimately took the form of the coup. And even prior to the coup, the sort of use of digital authoritarian systems, laws, mechanisms, surveillance technologies, pressure on technology and telecom providers to hard bake authoritarianism into their systems that took place prior to the coup, that then accelerated after the coup as well, and now is in many ways powering this new digital Iron Curtain moment that Myanmar is seeing. It's important for us to also recognize, imagine just 10 years ago, we were recognizing the importance and looking at internet access and lessons from Myanmar for the region and for the world. And now Myanmar is one of the top perpetrators of internet shutdowns, tied with another surprising, top part of that list, namely India. Access now maintains the Keep It On Coalition, which publishes also annually and on more periodic basis information about the number of internet shutdowns, namely the intentional disruption of internet access by governments and government-linked actors in the world. And for us, Myanmar has been very troubling, firstly in terms of that reversion and that reversal of the telecommunications openness conversation we saw there, but also how it's been actively used in the context of a conflict to in fact hide and to draw an opaque curtain around other abuses, from airstrikes to other atrocities taking place by a government that is recognized in this region internationally as illegitimate and which is actively using it to perpetrate other harms. We're even seeing shutdowns being used by other actors, including those who might be in conflict or resisting the junta, but are often using authoritarian tools themselves. And we should be concerned by that. Again, in the context of a business and human rights forum, we must look at the other conversations that are so often taking place in our space and see the human rights concerns that might shape it. And I think digital public infrastructure is another great example of where we should be cautious and careful. For example, right now, you are often seeing a sort of, you could say, democratization and universal welcoming of digital public infrastructure conversations, not realizing or not learning from the lessons we have seen in authoritarian and conflict situations, even in Asia. And by this is a great example. Today in Myanmar, you are seeing digital identity systems, digital public infrastructure, some of them deployed by development assistance actors and by the UN system and donor governments prior to the coup continuing to take place and being used to target activists, used to target minorities and others by an authoritarian government and others. And further, you are in fact seeing the active continuing cooperation by actors, including development assistance actors in the region, to provide new modular digital public infrastructure solutions to a junta administration that is seeking to directly use it to control their people and to commit atrocities. In this context, we therefore must be careful when it comes to AI. The conversations on AI show us that we need to learn the lessons from conflict and authoritarian situations, whether Afghanistan, whether Myanmar, or elsewhere, and understand how new phenomena of economic transformation or technological change still connect to the role of power, profits, and the systems of inequality and control that often control our societies. The previous speaker, Annie, characterized this quite well. That's one reason why at Access Now we are skeptics of AI ethics conversations. We are concerned that a lot of the conversations around AI, which comes from a framework of creating ethics frameworks, is actually used to sometimes stall or avoid going into conversations around human-centric governance of artificial intelligence. And that's an approach that we, along with many international human rights actors, have been seeking to advance since 2018, before, in a sense, the AI hype machine reached its peak level, which we see today. In 2018, at the RightsCon conference, the Summit for Human Rights and Technology that takes place that Access Now helps anchor in Toronto in 2018, we saw the Toronto Declaration on AI and Human Rights. And that's why today we, in fact, think that the conversation on AI governance would benefit most from listening to you all there in the room and at the BHR Summit, understanding how we learn the lessons of decades of practice regarding how business development and human rights must go hand in hand, and how BHR framework should shape every stage of development of business operations, product development, going to market, as well as accountability, remedy, and the many other steps of BHR frameworks. We are, in fact, concerned that this AI hype machine is swallowing our space. Whatever lessons we've drawn or wins we've achieved in data protection, previously launched standards, but also BHR, content governance, and accountability is being swallowed by a conversation that's saying AI safety is a new topic, a new issue. We should be concerned about killer AI systems like a Skynet taking over the world. That's the AI system that, of course, is notoriously recognized in the Terminator movie series. And we say that's not what we should be concerned about. We should be concerned around who is developing AI, what data is being used, how it's being plugged into existing systems of control, authoritarianism, or economic centralization. And we should try to see how we can safeguard existing wins that our digital rights community has and be able to advance targeted, unique, effective solutions and intervention. This is also happening at a moment where whatever small wins we've been achieving on AI and human rights frameworks over the last few years is at risk of being undermined by a global conversation around AI and geopolitical competition, AI innovation. Every country is seeking to say it wants to win on AI. And in doing so, they're seeking to advance approaches from national champions to cooperation with big tech actors who are promising that they can make these countries competitive or somehow be effective in the economic and political challenges they believe they're seeing on AI tomorrow. And that's one reason why we believe that at this moment, as you're speaking there in the forum, we need to take the lessons of our past BHR frameworks and adapt that in an AI context. I also flag that this is a key moment in which we see AI regulatory solutions in countries that sometimes recognize business and human rights frameworks or other frameworks, such as, for example, the AI Act in Europe, but also other national conversations on AI, including in this region, whether it's Taiwan with AI basic law, but also other AI related legislative conversations or regulatory conversations racing across different economies. You will see the UN advancing its conversation around AI governance with a new scientific panel and high level conversation they have on AI. And we believe that needs to learn from BHR and have civil society in the room and actually being able to contribute. But we also believe that BHR experts in the community need to be more listened to by heads of government and heads of state when they speak about AI, including when the next AI summit comes back to Asia, being held in New Delhi towards the end of February, and where we believe, again, we need to have lessons from the data protection community, from the business and human rights communities and fields of practice, but also from impacted, vulnerable communities and individuals, because the AI conversation should not be one driven by just heads of government, economic ministers, military experts, big tech players, investors, and others. We need everyday individuals represented. We need vulnerable communities spoken to and listened to. And we need to learn from the successes and mistakes of our digital rights conversation over the last 2 decades. Thank you so much, Svetlana.
Thank you so much, Raman. Actually, it's quite interesting when you point out like how can we make machines accountable. And on this point, before we come to our speakers who are here in physically, I would like to ask the room if anyone has questions to Raman or Ani. I guess we have to call a coffee service into this room. Everyone is tired and sleepy. Sorry. But on your points, Raman, regarding the accountability of machines, yes. We know that it's very difficult questions, not only in our circles, but also even the private sector is also sometimes questioning themselves, and poor our civil society actors who trying to fight all these camps with a very limited capacity. But from your point of view, or from the how can international frameworks like UN guiding principles be adapted to address AI-specific risks from your point, for instance? Can you comment? Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's very telling, right, that in the existing conversation on AI safety, there's an under-citation to the UN BHR framework. There's a lot of focus on other spaces, including sometimes relevant fields like medicine or other examples of sometimes dangerous sectors. But the approach is less one from the business human rights framework. It's in fact, in some ways, alarming. As some people may be aware, a lot of the geopolitical conversation around AI seems to sometimes be characterized as certain large AI companies are not saying an AI safety conversation that says, trust us, we will figure out how to do AI safety internally, we'll work with governments and others, don't allow others to come in. And in many ways, it seems to be a sort of, as you could say, anti-competitive grab and a desire to say, only seek and license these actors, don't allow others. Whereas we think the BHR framework is more useful, because it doesn't say restricted only to certain entities. It says whatever business operations you do and it impacts human rights, this is how you must conduct it, from initial conceptualization, market entry, development, and more. And there's principles, as you know, of remedy, and prior to that, of course, consultation and further. We believe that needs to shape what's happening. We think that right now there's also, as you can say, there's existing work from the last few decades of how the PHR community has worked with other allied areas like data protection, or even, for example, other compliance frameworks in the digital context, which we believe is more relevant to have to bring here into the AI conversation. Ultimately, I also think it's important to recognize that there's a certain danger in the UN system itself, that the UN's AI conversations, including the scientific process around AI, will not connect with the BHR processes that exist. And we hope those can be bridged, whether it's at the next BHR summits, whether in other locations globally or here in Bangkok itself. But also, I would suggest perhaps it's an opportunity for us prior to the or at the next AI summit happening, which will be in the region just 1,500 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers away from you all here in Delhi, where we can bring those communities together. Take the UN Office for, as you know, Digital Emerging Technologies, the VHR, teams there in the UN, OHCHR and more, and bring it together. But the last thing I just leave you with is just a certain thinking. I think in a lot of the existing solutions are good solutions. For example, the right to explainability and algorithmic transparency already exists in some data protection frameworks and has been looked at by the BHR community as well. We must advance and further those in the AI context. We must look at any AI conversation nationally and say, don't make it only about like systemic or existential risk, make human rights part of that. And if you're doing categorization of how you regulate a sector, keep in mind human rights, not just other threats, when you're doing that there. But also most importantly, is the processes of remedy and accountability. How can you bring a complaint up? How communities consulted? Who can you go to? And what is the role of national governments as well as perhaps independent institutions in that? Those are some examples there. And I'll just leave you with one last thing. There's simple areas from work spaces like cybersecurity and BHR, right? Knowing what is in your business operations or your product. For example, in the cybersecurity context, in the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a concept of the cybersecurity bill of materials. Any technology company should know what code is involved in the service they're providing, so they understand what vulnerabilities and risks might be there. We believe similar approaches should be adapted when it comes to AI, whether you're looking at it from a cybersecurity context or even from communities like open source software, who have said make systems open and accountable and auditable, not because you have a philosophical commitment to open source, but because that allows you to see what comprises the technological product you're making and what are the potential risks and who are the impacted communities by that.
All right. Thank you so much. In the interest of time.
One question asked, ma'am?
Sure.
One question. Yes, hello, sir. I'm Mangesh Manoj Deshmukh in India. Yeah, my one question, what mechanisms such transparency requirements, disclosures and independent audits are essential for AI system in high-risk environments? This is my question, sir.
Thank you. I think the first part should be recognize that in certain high-risk sectors with the biggest impact on human rights, we do believe there should be an absolute prohibition on the use of AI technologies. A good example is the use of facial recognition by the public sector, including by government actors in public spaces. We continue to believe, as with many members of the international community, that the use, for example, in that context there should be an absolute prohibition or total restriction. If you allow it, it should be generally under a presumptive ban, but with then particular exceptions of openness and accountability there. The other part of that is, for example, in requiring clear labeling and understanding that if someone is using AI system, that it be recognized and done. But the bigger, more important part is not the use of systems, it's in the creation of systems itself. If people's data or their protected information is being used in AI systems, we believe people need to be clearly informed and consent taken. And there needs to be either an adaptation of existing data protection laws in that context, or for those countries who are passing data protection laws for the first time enforcing them, as are many in Asia. And I can count there India, Sri Lanka, but also potentially Nepal, Bangladesh, as well as others in the region, including Thailand in terms of its own adaptation of its data protection law as well. They have the opportunity right now to leapfrog, to recognize that they need to already put in disclosure, transparency of data use in AI machine learning context, and then also go towards the remedy process. But the first step we would say is to require people to disclose how they're building the AI systems, what data they're collecting, and which individuals or communities are impacted by that. And as I said, on areas where there are high human rights risks, we still do believe that a total presumptive ban or a presumptive restriction should exist there. I'll end with one last comment here. In this region, I think in particular, where governments or private sector actors are allowing the machine learning system to be used by governments directly engaged in human rights abuse and authoritarian repression. And as Annie and I mentioned, Myanmar is the best example of that. We believe not only there should be a restriction, there should be a program of concerted political action, sanctions, other measures, other concerted action by governments to prevent these tools from being used to fuel conflict and support authoritarian repression. And we believe critically that's required in the context of Myanmar, not just from ASEAN member states, but from all UN member states.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Again, in the interest of time, I'm sorry for being a quite authoritarian moderator. We should give a floor to our next speaker. So William Nokrek from Bangladesh Garo Indigenous Community, who is the international president of Pax Romana, International Movement of Catholic Students, and co-chair of the International Youth Training Center Steering Committee. He previously served as the president of IMCS Bangladesh, Asia Pacific coordinator of IMCS, and council member of the Asia Indigenous Youth Platform, a dedicated advocate for indigenous rights, climate justice, and youth empowerment. And he also led the Bangladesh Indigenous Students Action Forum, bringing marginalized voices into global rights and sustainability dialogues. Please, William, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for the opportunity to share. As a youth, I believe young people are not just future, but key actors in shaping peace, justice, and climate action today. So across Asia Pacific, youth movements are mobilizing, raising awareness, building networks, and demanding accountability from business and governments whose decisions directly affect our communities. We are here discussing AI and technology, but in many indigenous communities and in areas affected by war and conflict, children and youth still lack access to quality education. And without education, youth are denied their right to grow, to participate, and to safeguard their future. Technology and AI cannot substitute for education. Rather, they must be built on a foundation where every child, regardless of background, has access to knowledge, skills, and dignity. I also speak as an indigenous youth from Bangladesh. For indigenous communities, climate change, land dispossession, and corporate exploitation are lived realities. These threats are multiplied by poorly regulated technologies, surveillance, and extractive industries. At the same time, our knowledge systems rotate in harmony with nature, and community well-being can offer powerful pathways towards sustainability and peace. But too often, they are ignored in policy and practice. This is why peace, climate justice, and human rights must always be considered together. In war and conflict zones, or for internally displaced persons, the absence of peace erodes every other right. Climate impacts then deepen these vulnerabilities, driving new conflicts and forced migration. And when children cannot go to school, when youth cannot access education, we fail an entire generation. Without peace, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no sustainability. Through Pax Romana, as one of the oldest youth and student movement, the International Youth Training Center, we are already building platforms that prepare young people to address these interconnected challenges that we have been trying, but not really successful, but we have been trying ourselves, our best. And we provide spaces for training, dialogue, and leadership development, linking grassroots realities with global policymaking. These networks demonstrate that youth are not only calling for change, but are already creating solutions. What is needed now is recognition, partnership, and investment to scale these efforts. Moving forward, youth and indigenous communities must not only be invited to conversations, but empowered as equal partners. We need participatory decision of policies and technologies, stronger grievance mechanisms, transparent supply chains, and investment in quality education, especially in indigenous and crisis-affected area. Only by centering peace, climate justice, education, and human rights, together we can ensure that business and technology truly serve people, especially those most affected, and help build a sustainable, just, and secure future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, William. It's very important points to take out from your speech regarding the peace and education for, of course, for the youth. But before we move to another speaker and to trying to keep the initial idea of a round table, I would like to ask the room if anyone has questions. It seems we have to call the coffee service into this room, or to finish it earlier. All right. Well, if there are no questions, but still, if in the course of in the course of speech of Adrian, if you get some ideas and questions and comments, please keep them, because at the end of that we will come to Menti, our favorite tool to collect your feedback, comments, complaints, or maybe 5 stars appreciation. So, Adrian, your turn. Just a second, I will read your bio. So, Adrian Pereira is the Executive Director and co-founder of North-South Initiative, Malaysia-based organization, focused on human rights and social justice. NSI aims to support marginalized community in the ASEAN region by fostering social justice through solidarity, critical engagement. Adrian has extensive experience with international organizations, and it's involved in various initiatives, including the ASEAN Forum of Migrant Labor and CARAM, right, Asia. NSI works with diverse groups such as migrant workers, refugees, indigenous youth, advocating for eradications of forced labor and promotion gender justice. And despite being a small organization, NSI has also successfully developed leaders capable of documenting human rights and violations. So, Adrian, the floor is yours, and we are really looking forward for your notes on this very important subject.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the generous introduction. Part of my work includes both labor migration and conflict resolution. And one of the difficult battles I think that we are losing is the struggle against hate speech. And a lot of migrants who come to Malaysia are very young people. They have traveled across many miles to be here in Malaysia, for example, to look for jobs. Some of them, because of the over-securitization of labor migration, they face all kinds of threats. Now, somebody mentioned that AI and digital tools are a double-edged sword. It's very true. We have a dilemma when we work with the community. How much do we really balance between ensuring their digital safety and also the accessibility to use the tools? So many of these community members, they may not be as lucky as us to have high literacy levels. So even accessing something like having a strong password may be difficult, and that further puts barriers for them when they want to protect themselves online and against hate speech. So I'll give you one example. When we look at TikTok, how many of you are on TikTok? Okay, so I was also reluctant, like all of you, to be on social media, but to really test the system and to see how the migrants and the refugee communities are engaged online. I signed up to about 6 or 7 different tools, and it gives me a chance to observe both how it's used in defense of their rights and how it backfires. So, for example, one of the refugee students has a school, and unfortunately, there's a campaigner who calls himself a religious leader. Don't ask me why this is bizarre. He goes to the refugees' houses, he goes to their places of worship, and he does this online live video streaming. And one would imagine that all this hate speech that is spewing, logically and algorithm-wise, the system shouldn't allow it to go viral, right? By now, it's 2025. There should be tools to identify the hate terminologies that is using. Graphically, they should already identify the risk towards the community, but it's not. So these tools, the videos go viral at an extremely fast rate. And when we try to counter, it just doesn't work. So why are the platforms allowing this to happen? Why are the algorithms allowing this to happen? And I think together with Access Now, we actually tried our best to report these accounts, but the rate at which they move, maybe they're probably well-resourced, is so fast, it's just hard to counter. So we have this problem, the amount of hate speech and how we can counter. But at the same time, the online tools have also helped migrant workers with information. A lot of the policies, the safeguards have never been translated into languages they understand. So the AI tools are now being used, whether it's in text or in video, to spread messages of safety on how to safeguard each other. It's quite remarkable. It's interesting to see how without the help of NGOs, without the help of all these big development agencies, they're taking own initiative to keep themselves safe. So it's either in the form of messaging and animation. They're also using animation to spread messages on how to be safe. Of course, once in a while, we'll find one fatal error in the messages, which we have to step in terms of intervention. So we always constantly trying to balance these two elements, the tools and also a positive response from the migrants. I think the fact that thousands of young people from Southeast Asia fell victims of these job scams was really a horrible and very bitter experience. I had the opportunity to help rescue 3 of them. And looking at the amount of deception that they go through, it's mind-boggling at how at every stage there's always a digital and a physical actor involved. So it's not just the digital aspect. There are people moving these things, moving the deception, using the brands' names. And why haven't these brands stepped in to fix their mess? Till today, I don't understand. Either all of us in this room have failed, or that the algorithm and these companies who are doing this human trafficking and job scams are just 10 steps ahead of us. So we really have a lot of work to do. I hope we can continue the conversation and keep looking for creative ways of how to solve this. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Well, I mean, it's very important points, especially in our times when, unfortunately, every second person is looking for information on its cell phone or device, rather than sometimes read a book. But yeah, and economical and political situations is also giving more troubles for us to understand who is right and who is wrong in the current situation, and of course requires additional knowledge and education to figure out where is the real information and where is the disinformation or fake news. Difficult? No. Any questions from the room? Yes, please.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi,
Okay.
I am Deepak Yadav. I am from India. I have a question on this migration issue. So, what do you feel the role of the authority on government in this regard, not from the penalizing point of view, but to create an atmosphere in the society so that the things cannot happen in this manner?
Okay, maybe the second question, and then we'll start answering. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Srishti. I'm an intern with IYTC. I think my question is specifically for Mr. Ramanjit Singh Chima. Earlier you mentioned, you talked about Myanmar and cyber security and how governments from other countries need to sanction these authoritarian governments. I recently read this report about how there's a company called Finance Uncovered and Myanmar now, and they released a report on how European countries, the development funds that they're investing in Myanmar, it's being used used in a mass surveillance company, and it's being used to increase the crackdown on dissent in Myanmar. So I think, I'm not sure how big the scale of this report was, but even after, proof of things like these happening, there's still funds going into surveillance, and I think sanctions aren't really working. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Raman?
I believe that's a plan. Just waiting to check if you want to put in.
I think, sorry, no more questions for now? Sorry, Raman, it's my fault. There is one more question, and then we come back to you answering the questions, and then we also have Adrian to answer the question, and maybe William wants to add anything. Sorry. The third question, please.
First of all, thank you for such an insightful session. My question is, as the session's name suggests, who programs whom? So this raises the issue of power. So my question is with regard to that, in your view, who are shaping whether the business is shaping the community or whether the community is shaping the business. So I want to know your take on this. Thank you.
Is it for all speakers or for particular speakers?
Yeah, any can answer,
Okay.
not specific.
Thank you so much. So I'll get one more question, no? Okay, maybe Adrian, you will answer you on the migration, and then we go to Raman, and then the answer on the third question.
So when labor migration happens, it's a very lucrative business. It's a combination of migration and human trafficking. So from the point of origin to the transporters, to governments, to agents, to employers, to the return, to rentals of the accommodation, everyone wants to make money. So at every stage, there'll be some misinformation. There'll be some information. We didn't even know that there's visa-free to enter Thailand for some countries. We just found out. Surprise, right? Even though online it's saying you need a visa. So misinformation drives a lot of these processes, and there's a lot of ill will to milk money from migrants at every stage. So what government should do is, have a simple checklist translated into every language in the continent and explain it to the community members before you decide to migrate. These are your options. That is not happening. So all the safeguards have been taken away. I don't know why. Maybe it's just unfortunate that, this is organized crime, and hopefully AI can fill the gaps, but I think it's still too risky. There should be both the physical and the digital solutions at the moment. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you, Raman. Just to remind that we have really not much time, and we still have a Menti to use. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of brevity, I'll just answer Shrishti's question directly. Thank you, Shrishti, so much for that. That's an excellent question. In fact, the report you referred to, the Finance Uncovered piece, does also have both quotes and the benefit of some information and expertise from my colleague Vepio. So I just want to do that disclosure. Vepio is my colleague leading on Myanmar within my team and was interviewed for that piece. And that piece refers to GEEG networks, GEEDGE. Some people may be familiar with that name or should be. It's becoming increasingly a controversial, well-known Chinese surveillance Chinese tech vendor that has his history in helping build the Chinese Great Internet Firewall, the one maintained by the PRC, and which is now being used in Myanmar to power the digital Iron Curtain. But Shrishti, just to also flag to you, in fact, just 2 to 3 days ago, there's now, in fact, perhaps an even more well-covered report by Associated Press working together with several organizations, including Amnesty's Tech Lab, that has actually uncovered how these network technology is being used in Myanmar, also being used in Pakistan and in numerous other locations to promote authoritarian control in terms of great firewall type efforts, monitoring, tracking what's going on there. And that is a lesson. Myanmar's case is a mix of sanctions, but also I would argue further political and regulatory action that's being needed by Western governments and like-minded governments. Many of them were more active right after the coup, or you could say for the first 2 years, 3 years after the coup. But several have said after that their priority has been Ukraine, but then also just tracking wider global political developments. And due to that, in a sense, gap, we are now seeing the failure to combat these actors and track what they've done in Myanmar is now being replicated in other countries, which just shows that actually we need concerted, clear political action using BHR framework, sanctions, and more. I think there is a particular moment right now where we should look at the big vendors who are trying to, for example, promote authoritarian abuse in Myanmar and see how we can take action across the region. But lastly, I just also flag that we also need to see what governments are doing in terms of new partnerships that are problematic. And for those of you in the room, I'd encourage you to look at how the modular open source identity project, MOSIP, that is housed and incubated by the Indian government, has just announced very problematic partnership work with the Myanmar junta. And that's an example of us failing to recognize one problem and allowing many more to spiral out of control. And it's not just about Myanmar, although that is a crisis. This will happen elsewhere, as Geach Network's illustration has shown us.
All right, thank you so much, Raman. And I also advise you to scan QR code from the reports we had. Well, there is also a research on Myanmar which was published before the Internet Coup report on Chinese companies' impact on the surveillance in Myanmar, Kazakhstan, and other countries. All right, the last question which we had about who programs who has power of what. Any speaker want to respond on that or provide a quick comment? Ani, Raman? Well, while others thinking, I also would like our tech team to put the Menti. Beth, can you put the Menti on the screen? And I also will quickly comment in terms of the third question. Again, it's a very philosophical question, who has power over the algorithm? But first of all, let's go into the roots. Who makes the algorithm? Who has the power to write those codes? And then who gives the decision, this code to be alive and this code to be operate? And who find out about that the code is actually harmful for the society? All the sectors should actually meet and talk and also reflect on ethics of those operations and algorithms. And that's why we have UNGPs, which obviously need some elaboration in terms of the tech sector and telecoms and ICT in general. Because, the UNGPs are covering private sector somehow, but there's no specific, ITC one. Of course, there's some projects, including our project, including BTEC, UN BTEC, which are working on enhancing that, but we still need to talk. And also, how Raman mentioned today, we need consultations altogether. On this rhetoric note, I invite you to scan this beautiful Menti QR code and provide your inputs. There are 8 questions, something like that, but the beauty of Mentimeter is that you don't need to write the reports of 30 pages. You just need to write maximum a sentence or a word regarding the request on the question. We give for this like 5 minutes, I think, 5-10 minutes, you to respond. Does everyone have the access? It also involves online participants. Okay. I don't know, I see only likes, I don't see the inputs. Are we that lazy just to type a few words, or probably very tired by the end of the day? Okay. So, okay, the internet probably might be also tired by the end of the day and provides the inputs with some delay. So the session on nickel mining, human rights due diligence, okay. The situation in Myanmar is eye-opener. Well, I'll tell you more on Myanmar. Actually, I also advise you to look for the last news on Myanmar, especially on telecom sector, because there's some documentary was recently published on Telenor Myanmar. Quite interesting to read about, if anyone is interested. There's also quite interesting parts on the report which involves PRC companies into the surveillance, and especially how that data was used for the surveillance. Okay. The next question. Well, risks and opportunities of AI and crisis. Well, based on the hype of AI on the last 3 years, it looks that we are talking only about the risks or the super energy-safe solutions for everyday work. I guess many of you are using one of the AI products for correcting text, emails, and sometimes even creating PPTs, like presentation slides, which is helpful, but obviously in terms of AI as a general subject, we have to look at the situation in the wider scope, especially on the human rights impact side. Okay, we have, please share one concrete takeaway you will bring back to your work on advocacy. And probably after this question, we can also close the session because we quite delaying the session. Okay. How confident do you feel? Oh, okay. The previous question, please. So how confident do you feel about integrating AI and human rights insight into your own context after the session? Okay. It was more than, now it's reducing. So there is still some hesitation in terms of using AI in the everyday life and especially in human rights context. Well, guys, this is the first day of UN Business and Human Rights Forum, and the first day of people complaining and praising certain technologies. I would love to see the reaction on this question at the end of UN Business and Human Rights Forum. Probably if you're interested, we could also run this again, maybe next year, maybe at the end of the forum, we'll see if technically it will be allowed. But on this note, I guess everyone is done with the questionnaire. I would like to send big thanks to all participants here who survived with us until the end of the day, physically or online. Big thanks to our speakers for sharing their expertise, knowledge, and inputs and recommendations. And big thank you to the UN premises to hosting us here online and physically. And on this note, thank you so much and hope to see and talk to you during this week if you are interested. And also please welcome to talk to our speakers. Big applause to everyone. Thank you, and we are done here.